lot of hungry children. And this was all before the recession and the housing stuff and everything that's going on. I'm sure these numbers have doubled, or if not more. So we said, what are we going to do to meet these needs? They clearly need to be met. If they're not met by us, they're going to be met by other faiths, and that's not good. And so we need to meet them, and we need to meet them the right way, in an Orthodox Christian way. So we looked at different things that we were doing. The first thing we did, which was the easiest thing to really get into, was soup kitchens. I'm sure some of us have served in soup kitchens just, on the regular. And what we did is we called up soup kitchens and we said, hey, we have a group, we have 5-10 youth. We want to come in on afternoon, on a Saturday, on some weekend, and we want to serve. Sometimes they'd ask questions like, hey, you guys are serving, are you guys going to talk about God? What are you guys here for? What's your real intent? Do you have other intentions? If they're questioning too much, the basic thing is that you're going to go feed them. You're going to go as a group. It's good to have like a common t-shirt, okay, so that people come up to you, and if everybody's wearing the same t-shirt, like, hey, where are you guys coming from? What's that t-shirt mean? What are those letters? And that's just a way into talking. Now, the best thing is to go to Christian places. Why? Because it's a lot easier to talk about Christ, or people accepting of Christian groups. But if that's not available, you can start there and then go on somewhere else. So that was our first thing. And a lot of us, like for me, example, I don't talk. I didn't talk to anybody. I don't go up to anybody. I just keep to myself. That's more like Mina and like some of the other guys. They can talk to people. So a lot of us, especially to start off with, all we were doing was handing out forks. We weren't doing much. But even that was a service, and that got us into it. And then when people would take the forks, we'd be like, say thank you, and then you'd say, oh, you're welcome, and then you can start a conversation right there. So anything really that you do, as simple and as dumb as handing out a fork, we'll start a conversation. We'll maybe ask them about, hey, what's the reason why you guys are here? Why would 5 or 10 youths or whatever give up their weekend to be out here? And then you could say, well, actually, we're Christian and we believe in God, and God taught us to do this, and so on and so forth, and you take it from there. So that was the first thing we got into. Another thing we got into was food banks. Food banks, another easy kind of service thing. You can go to your local food bank somewhere around here, help, like they have like canned foods, and you could help like package the store. You could help give out the food to the people. Same thing, when you're giving out the food to people coming in once a week or once a month for their food for that time, you have a chance to talk to them, and they're going to be curious, and that conversation could lead to something. So those were really the first two things we started. Now I'm going to go more deeper into the things that are currently going on now. We haven't done as much of the soup kitchens and food banks as we did in the beginning, because we always met a barrier. So once a lot of the shy people, like me, started talking, we realized, hey, we really want to discuss our faith. We want to discuss more about Christianity. We want to really let people know what we're about. And some of the organizations would say, hey, don't really get into your faith that much, or don't really talk about Jesus, just be nice. So that didn't really work out for us. So we wanted to have our own autonomy. So we realized that we can do that on our own. Yeah, the organizations were great to start off with, but we really needed something else. So the two things that we did were midnight runs and the JC events. So I was talking to some of the people here, and they were telling me that you guys already do a sandwich run. This is pretty much the exact same thing. I heard you guys do it once a month, which is great. Keep at it. Be consistent. But I'll tell you guys how we did it and the benefits we got from it, and then maybe if there's something that we could learn from each other. So the midnight run pretty much entails a bunch of things. It's all inclusive. So it starts off with the food. So first you got to get the food. One way we did that was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I think that's the picture right there in the corner. This is at Jersey City, St. George, St. Shenouda Church. And pretty much you'd come together. It's nice because it's all inclusive. You have the people who didn't want to go out or couldn't go out for whatever reason. They could start the service in church. And that's just that simple, making the sandwiches. Another thing you could do is you could ask neighborhood stores to donate. A lot of them want to help out. Like pizza stores, they would gladly offer a couple of pizzas if you tell them what's the reason for it. So you could just go and ask them, and a lot of them are generous. The spiritual aspect, there's a huge spiritual aspect for this sandwich run or the midnight run or whatever you guys want to call it, is number one, the prayer before, the prayer during, and the prayer after. So we'd get together before as a group after the sandwiches were done, and we'd pray. And you pray for the mission, you pray for everybody involved, you pray for the people you're going to serve, you pray for the people that donated, you pray for the place, you pray for the organization that helped you run it. So it's just a lot of prayer. And then obviously you can have separate liturgies or services or just prayer meetings for the specific event. And then also, some people can't go for whatever constraints. Maybe they have work, maybe whatever it is. They could stay in church and pray, or they could be at home and pray, and you could have a specific ministry just for prayer. And that's just as important, because you're not going to do anything if God's not accepting your work. So that's from that aspect. Obviously, toiletries as well that we'd give out and clothes, and that's also very important. They actually, some of the most important things were the toiletries, because they needed it on a daily basis. And they could be donated. You could go to the 99-cent store, Salvation Army. You can hold drives, and that in and of itself can be its own event, just holding drives for people to donate stuff. And then, so this is all like the back end. Now the final thing, and the most important thing, is when you're out there. So when you're out there, I mean, you need to say something, whatever it is. A lot of these people never been exposed to Christ, or they have been exposed to Christ maybe in a different setting of Christianity, or they've been taught the wrong things about Christianity. So it's very important when you're there to give them something. You can't, this is an example, you can't give a baby solid food. You can't give them solid, you got to give them baby food. They'll die. They'll die 100% of the time if you give them solid food. It's the same thing when you're dealing with people who are new to the faith or don't know the faith. You got to treat them like babies. You got to give them something small. Sometimes we don't realize, for example, when you do the sign of the cross, how much faith is in the sign of the cross. You don't realize the little things you do as a Christian. You could be giving them something great. You don't have to go through the whole theology of what we believe. I think that's counterproductive, especially in the beginning. You take it slow in them, you take it baby steps. Me and Mina were talking to one of the priests from upstate Cherish, Abuna Ya'ub, and when we told him about the whole situation and how we were having trouble getting a lot of the people we're serving to really go to the next level, he said, well, you have to treat them like babies. Just like when we were babies, we were the same thing. Like when you were 2 years old, your mom didn't give you the whole creed. It just doesn't work that way. Start baby steps and move forward. So you do that. Like I said, little things like, the sign of the cross, little things like saying the Our Father whenever you pray, okay? Introducing, like whenever a situation pops up, just showing Jesus in the situation, like, oh, I had a hard day, this and this is going on, oh, well, maybe God's showing you this, or maybe God's giving you this, without giving heavy theology in the beginning. You don't say, oh, well, you have to take communion right now, and that will solve your problem. Obviously you need communion. Obviously you need all these sacraments, but you got to go slow. These are people who might never have been in a church before in their whole life, or their whole family was shot up, who have psychiatric diseases. They can't really comprehend what you're talking about fully in its entirety. But it would be like if you're teaching a little kid in Sunday school in first grade. What would you do? You would give him the story very simplified, from the Bible that you want to give him that day. Or if you're giving them a message, it's just a short verse. You're not going into a whole 30-minute discussion with them. And you take time with them. Sometimes they're stubborn. Sometimes they've been having one mindset their whole life. So they don't know any other way to look at the situation, or they haven't been able to figure out any other way to deal with problems. So now you're going to give them something completely revolutionary, so you just got to go slow with them and just be patient. And then, obviously you talk, you inspire them, and consistency. Consistency is probably the most important thing you're going to do with these people. They've been let down their whole life by people. People have come out of their life, whether their families, their parents, their friends, their wives, And if you're consistent, at least you'll be like a stable bedrock in their life, and they can rely on you to learn something about God. But if you're not consistent, they'll say, well, even these guys abandoned us. So that's important. So if it's once a month, that's great, but don't make it once a week and then skip a week. You understand what I'm saying? So that's important. So that was one of the aspects we did, which was the midnight run. So we evolved from the midnight run into the JC for JCs. So pretty much the midnight run is you're going around with a car full of stuff, and you're going to certain specific places, and you're handing out, whether it's clothes or toiletries or food. So the next step was, once again in Jersey City, there's a park right by the church that's full of homeless people, and that park is also a train station, and then people come back and forth from church, and they pass 30-40 homeless people daily a block away from the church. So somebody came up with a bright idea, well, why don't we serve these people? I mean, these people need help, so let's do it. So that's exactly what we did. We took a group, especially initially, of like 20-30 people, and we'd go with pizza boxes. And the idea was that you'd go down there with a pizza box. Obviously, homeless people are hungry, come up to you, you give them pizza, and you talk about God. It's very simple. It's not hard. And with them, now you're feeding them, and then you can open up about God. And for them, they always have a lot of questions. They always have weird beliefs, and it's your job to kind of give them a little bit of clarity. We would stand with them. Somebody would give a 5-minute talk about anything. Once again, just very small, very simple, something that anybody can understand who doesn't know anything about God. Okay, and then we'd do a prayer. And in that prayer, there's the Our Father, there's the sign of the cross, there's just small things about our faith. Okay, and then we eat together, and we'd see wonders. The way the day worked really was, hey, what's up, babe? So the way the day worked was, once again, almost in all of these kind of mission things, you'll see the same structure from beginning to end. It starts off with prayer. We'd all meet, pray. Who are you praying for? You're praying for everything. You're praying for the whole service. You're praying for what you're doing, the people who brought the food, and so on and so forth. And you're praying for a vision for the day, and you're praying also for who God wants to touch that day, and to have some kind of willpower and some kind of insight into what God wants to do that day, because every day we'd see new things, and God would show us different things. And then the Agbeya was a very powerful tool, and I suggest that you keep the Agbeya there, because it's very structured, and it'll keep you focused as well, so you won't forget certain things. And then, so that's for the spiritual benefit. And then over there, you're praying, number one, before the sermon. You're praying while you're talking to the people. So even though somebody's coming up to you and talking to you and telling you all these weird things, or their strange beliefs about God, or their non-beliefs about God, or their hard life, in your head you're praying for that person. You're saying, God, give clarity to this person, or what do I even say? Or because sometimes you'll be stumped. What happens when somebody comes up to you and tells you, well, my whole family was murdered last week, so I'm here now. I don't know what to do. What do you say? There's no teaching in the world that would tell you what to say. So something that you definitely got to pray, and there's something that definitely God has to reveal to you what's going to work with this individual. So that's the spiritual benefit. Obviously, the physical benefit, you're going to feed them, you're going to give them some clothes. That's important. A little story. I'm sure a lot of people know about this story. This is just some side thing. Back to the whole teaching them in little steps in simple faith. I think there was like a simple guy, and some spiritual leader was trying to teach him the Our Father. He couldn't remember the Our Father, and he kept trying to recite it, and he kept saying the wrong words. And eventually, like, the spiritual leader was like fed up. He's like, this guy will never learn Our Father. I don't care. So he started reciting it, and he starts walking, and eventually he's walking on water. And the spiritual guy looks at him like, what's going on here? And then the guy turns around and says, so what was that line again? I don't know what to say. So the spiritual guy looks at him and says, you know what? Say it whatever way you want. I mean, if you're walking on water, it doesn't matter. It's really the same thing here. We have to really look at it with a different lens in the beginning, because we always want the product. And we've been doing this ministry for 5 years now, close to 6. We haven't seen fruits everywhere, there's been a lot of highlights, but it takes time. These things take time, and it's good to know that going in. And one of the sayings we have in medicine, at least, is sometimes we want to, instead of treat the patient, we treat ourselves. So we make ourselves feel better by, telling, the homeless people or the people who are sick all these amazing things, and missing the point that we didn't get anything across. So that's important. So I think we went through everything: the food and clothing, agbeya and preparation, and then the communication part. So this has been really nice. We've duplicated this model not only in Jersey City, in New York City as well. It's really easy model. It doesn't take much. Everybody involved doesn't have to have a theological degree, but should be following up with some spiritual, father or some spiritual guide. Why? Because, just to get feedback for yourself, to be able to be more able to talk out there. And feel free to talk about this. So I just wanted to, just a couple of highlights from the JCs. Like I said, there's people, that you pray with. Some people don't pray at all. So imagine, all of a sudden you go from somebody who never talks to God, is waiting for you to learn how to talk to God. And you can do that very simply just by one-on-one and also the group setting. Some things that are crazy, when you give out food, say you give 2 slices of pizza, sometimes a homeless person will say, oh, this slice is enough for me. I know some other guy downstairs who needs a slice, so let me go give it to them. They're really teaching you, what these guys go through. For them, it's sometimes easier to relate to Orthodoxy sometimes because, we talk about the struggle and the daily struggle that we have, especially people who are fighting. They're actually struggling, versus, some other type of like prosperity Bible. So you can relate to them on that level, and it helps. Like we said, keep in mind that some people have psychiatric diseases, so don't be alarmed if you start hearing funny things. Just take it for what it is. And one of the cool things that we've seen over the last couple of years actually was the involvement of other organizations. Like all of a sudden we're in Journal Square, and then we were the only ones for a while, and then all these other churches now are coming from around the neighborhood, and they're offering, some will offer hot cocoa, some will offer clothes. And you just see the community is inspired by what you guys are doing. So it's important to know that you're affecting multiple levels, not just in the church, but all around. So that's the food aspect of what we were doing, the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. Next thing I wanted to talk about was, yes? Homeless people, hungry people. It doesn't matter, yeah. The next group was the hospitals and the nursing homes. I'm going to just talk about, before I get into each group, I'm just going to talk about the general approach to talk to a hospital or a nursing home and tell them, hey, we're coming, and how simple it is. So when the group first started, my job was the hospital part. And first I panicked. I'm like, what are we going to do? Because, how are we going to get hospitals to agree to Coptic people to come in and talk about God? I thought it was impossible, and I didn't think that there would be a practical way to do it. But what I did was, first thing I did was contact the volunteer department. And I said, hey, our group's name is FTFT. We have a lot of youth here that are willing to come and give gifts. What do you think? Would we be able to do that? And they were actually very receptive. They said, oh, really? What kind of gifts are you going to give? Oh, we're going to give little teddy bears, whatever, coloring books, whatever we had available from the 99-cent store at the time. And they were open to it. And our first group was that we just took a group of 10 people, and we went to the hospital and we gave out gifts. And it was very powerful. We were all in the same t-shirt, and we never had to mention where we were from because we were always asked, just naturally. You'd walk in and people would be like, hey, you guys, where are you guys from? Why are you guys doing this, giving us gifts, today? And so that was very helpful. So that's an easy thing that you can do. Same thing you can do with nursing homes and assisted living places. Rehab centers are really nice as well. Same thing, you call the volunteers department and say, hey, we have a group and this is what we want to do. And it becomes easy after that. The people that are receptive there will want to talk with you more. And the people that are not will nicely accept the gift. And that will be it. So there's some constraints as opposed to the JC for JC where you could just talk to anybody about anything, nobody's saying anything. But here the organizations sometimes will have rules and say, hey, you can't really talk about God, spontaneously unless somebody asks you. So there are some constraints in this model. I have seen it though. There's a very nice model in Rochester where they had an agreement with the nursing home, hey, we're a Christian group and we're going to be talking about Christ. To the point where when I was with them, we were doing Agbeya. We'd go into the nursing home and, Brother Antonius was up there in Rochester, he would lead it. And it was crazy, we did the sign of the cross, Our Father, and we'd do the whole Agbeya prayers. And then we'd sing songs with them, we'd do whatever. I think that's an extreme case. I highly doubt that you're going to find that kind of acceptability everywhere you go, but it's possible. If they could do it, there's no reason why I'm sure we could do it to some level. But if not, at least to start off with something. And then when you're talking to them, ask them about, what are the rules, what are the regulations? Is there some things that we can't do? What can we do? How much time do we have with them? And so on and so forth. And then that'll clarify whether this is a suitable place or not. Some places aren't suitable and you shouldn't go. And then lastly, like we talked before, is you have to be consistent. Just like with anything, if you don't follow up, then number one, you won't know the fruits. And number two, maybe something that just needs a little bit more watering, will never blossom. So you really need to be consistently following up with people. And you need to, when you go there, and then people will be waiting for you, because you're coming there to visit people. And we'll talk about why that's such a big deal in a little bit. So the first thing was the nursing home, which we called Visiting Angels. So one of the things that's very striking in nursing homes that I think we don't really think about is a lot of these old people don't have anybody to visit them. Their families abandon them, like legitimately. Imagine going 2 years without somebody visiting you. That's crazy. We can't do that here. Nobody can sometimes stay a whole day without talking to anybody in their house, let alone years. So it's a real problem. It needs to be addressed. There's many ways to address it. You just put phone calls, visits, and prayers up there. But this is a service that you can definitely do as a church, because a lot of them are really afraid about dying alone. It's a big concern. So what we did is, like I said before, we call up these nursing homes and we tell them we have a group. Can we come visit? And sometimes we'd have activities. It's really nice when you can plan an activity. For example, like a skit. Skits are easy to make. They'll have a central message, and it's just something you could do easy. You could also play games with them. Bingo is very popular in nursing homes. And songbooks, they love performances. Any songs, it doesn't matter if you don't know how to sing at all. It doesn't matter to them. Half of them can't hear you anyway. But anything where you're performing, they love it. And it's just about that time together. A lot of them will just bring you over to hug you or kiss you because, like I said, there's no interaction for them. And some of them are not with it. They're demented, so they'll just enjoy the show. And then the other ones that aren't demented that you can actually speak to, you can actually talk to them about God. Some of them used to be pastors. Some of them used to have some kind of involvement to some sort in church, so they appreciate it. And some of them haven't known God, even at their old age, 60, 80, whatever it is. And you might be introducing God for the first time before somebody dies, which is a big deal. Same thing like I've discussed before, prayer is very crucial. Before, after, read the Agbeya. Remember you're serving Christ. We say that very casually, but it is Christ and His people. It makes it a lot easier to kiss an older person that doesn't look too good. And you want, you're praying during, in the middle, before. One of the hindrances that you guys might find is they want to know about your shots and like PPDs and stuff like that. One of the things that you can do, which is very simple, is that if there's a doctor in church or whatever, he can do PPDs for everybody, one shot. It's not a big issue. Or you can go to your primary care doctor. That seems to be one of the few things that stopped us from going to nursing homes. It's not a big deal. Don't let it stop you. And you make adjustments as see fitting. You'll go somewhere one time and then you'll do something And maybe it wasn't successful. Maybe it wasn't helpful at all. Maybe you weren't able to talk about Christ at all. In that case, maybe you want to switch it up. You want to do something else. You want to think about other ways to approach them. With older people, seeing, vision, and hearing is diminished. So maybe if you have a PowerPoint presentation that's this big, it's not a good idea. Maybe next time you want to do a bigger presentation, you want to do louder sounds, practical stuff like that. So that was the Visiting Angels group. Same thing was this is the hospital group, Talitha Kumi. Same exact thing. You want to wear common clothing, you want to meet up for prayer, and you want to serve them. Once again, these guys are very sick, debilitated, and you want to just show them the love of Christ while you're there. And if they have questions, please, by all means, answer them and tell them about Jesus. So I want to tell you guys I'll tell you one story for now. The first time we went to a children's rehab, which was very powerful for me. So we went there not expecting anything, and I didn't know what we were going to do. We were told, we're going to have some time with the kids, a half an hour with the kids. And the kids are 3 years old, so we had ideas of telling them little stories and everything. And I never forget, we were in the gym, and then all of a sudden, a 3-year-old girl in a wheelchair with a trach tube was wheeled into the place. And I was just in awe. I was like, what am I going to do? I don't even know how I'm going to talk to her. She's paralyzed from the waist down. There's nothing really to do with her. And it was crazy. As soon as she walked in, she didn't have a lot of movement in her lower extremities, but she was able to get on a mat, and all she wanted was somebody to throw the ball to her, and that was service. And that was something very simple. And then while we were there, the people that were there just wanted to know about us, They're like, usually we get old guys coming to do this kind of stuff. Why are you guys doing it? And it was an excellent opportunity to minister to the people there and tell them, hey, we're Christian and we love God and so on and so forth, and this is why we're doing it. And they're like, wow, you guys could be doing anything else on a Saturday or anything else, on a Friday. So that was really powerful. And you'll have God will provide a lot of touching moments, in these things, and it'll really, number one, validate what you're doing, because that's important, and it'll keep you going. So that's a very easy thing. Once again, volunteers department, and if I can do it, honestly, if I can call and set up an event, anybody can. It's not a big deal. And we had regular follow-up. We ended up doing many hospitals, whether it's in Jersey, in New York, where we're from. And if you have any questions, you could ask me. Next group was Christ Carpenters. So this was the group really for the people who needed shelters. What we did, the idea behind it was, we didn't know how we were going to do it, but there were certain organizations in place. Some of them create homes from the homeless, like Habitat for Humanity. I'm sure some of you guys know that around here. There's homeless shelters. There's also groups that go around restoring parks and neighborhoods, where you can literally go to an abandoned park and clean it up. That's also an option. Same thing, you create clean places for them. So what we did, this one is easy if you have a large group. Say for example you have a large group and you don't know what to do with them. This one's easy. You can just call for Habitat for Humanity and tell them we have 15 people or so and we want to come help build a house. And all you have to do that day is show up in boots and or just wear clothes, dirty clothes that you can get dirty. And you go there and they guide you. And we did that numerous times in the beginning. And you'd go to a designated site, and it was cool because the house that you're working on is going to be a house for a family. Sometimes the family would actually show up and help you work on it. And you're given a certain room, hey, cut these tiles here, move this wood here. And like if you can't do physical labor, they'll give you something simple. It doesn't have to be something crazy. But that's simple. You can also, like I said, they have the community things. And with this group especially, it's good to contact existing organizations. Sometimes we think, oh, we're going to do mission, let's reinvent the wheel. And let's make our own, Habitat for Humanity. Let's make our own this. And sometimes we have to. Like I said, for the JC for JC, we kind of naturally had to do that because we wanted to preach more. And we had almost like a glass ceiling. But in a case like this is something where you can definitely just join other successful organizations and give them a hand. Great for big groups. So the last group that I'm going to talk about today, which is probably the most difficult ministry that we encountered. I personally didn't do much of this, but I know Mina was heavily involved in this. This was his level of expertise. I'll talk for like 5 minutes, and then maybe Mina, you can clarify some points a little bit more about it. So there's like 4 major things in this prison ministry, because a lot of us, we look at prisoners and what are we going to do with them? So number 1 and most important is the prayer ministry, and that's simple, self-explanatory. I'm not going to get into that. Just pray. And I think even through what is it, Project Freedom or Freedom? What was the name of the organization? Prison Fellowship. So there's ways to do that more organized. The second thing is the pen pal ministry, which is literally you can write to a prisoner, and this is Prison Fellowship is a Christian organization, and you can use them to safely, write back and forth to prisoners, and you could discuss God. And this is important because just like those old people were neglected for years and years, all those prisoners are neglected for years and years. Families abandon them, all their friends abandon them, and they have nothing. So they need, and that's why a lot of these other faith groups are so successful with them, is because they're able to come there and just give them some time and give them some attention, give them some support for their families outside. So that's a really nice ministry, and that you can just sign up online and Prison Fellowship, and you could do that in groups. So that's one thing. In prison ministry, a lot of the times requires training. We had a couple of the trainings done at Staten Island in our church, and pretty much, I don't know how it's set up, maybe you could tell us how to set up the trainings, but they would come in and you would have 20 people, and they would do a day of training. And these are trained professionals who know how to talk to people in prison about Christ, and how to really present it in a non-threatening way, and in a way that's going to be effective. And at the end you get a certificate, and that certificate is good because then you could use it, and then you could actually go into prison in a more formal way and preach and talk about Christ. There was also prison days. Actually, do you want to just talk about the prison days and what was going on with those?
Sure. So the prison days were just days that basically they would call them hope festivals, where they would actually be kind of interesting. Like in the middle of Rikers Island Prison, which is one of the biggest jails in New York, they'd have all the prisoners out, and we'd have like a little, Christian praise concert for them, and there'd be a message, and it would be actually very nice. Sometimes they'd have these special events that are held by Prison Fellowship, and this organization, what's kind of good about it is that they're in 117 countries across the world, and they've been doing this for a long time. The dude Chuck Colson, I don't know if you've heard about him, from like the 70s. He was like a really famous guy, went to jail, found Christ, came out, established an organization. Now he's changing the world. He died now. May God repose his soul. But he did a good work before he died. And the idea of both the presence in prison, whether it's through actually conducting a prison Bible study, like we were able to get in through multiple different avenues. One, for the girls, we kind of made this like an internal rule. We had the girls serve female prisoners, and we had the males serve male prisoners for obvious reasons. We trust prisoners, but this is just precaution. So we had the girls, actually, they were what was called in a nursery. So women who are, you just get pregnant and you get locked up, you're still pregnant, and you're going to have your baby in prison. And the babies that were born in prison, we had our girl servants kind of go in there and serve with them and like play with the babies, and so it was real cute for the girls. And then also it was an opportunity for them to interact with the girls who are in prison. And like they were sharing with us all these stories of how, like, they'd go in there with little icons, and they'd go in there with little Bibles, and he'd share with them, and all of a sudden you got these, locked up 20-year-olds who their new Shafi'ah, their new like intercessor is, Abu Sufyan or something. It's like really weird, but it's cool. Okay, that would happen, let's say, with the girls, and then with the guys, we would go into both the juvenile facilities and the adult facilities. And what was real cool is that, when you're going to like the poor and the sick and stuff like that, you got to bring stuff. With prisoners, you can't bring stuff because that's illegal, it's contraband. But they don't really need stuff. Like, even just the fact that, wow, you're here, I'm dirt. Like, why would you come to me? Like, lawyers know, like, prisoners like are perceived as dirt, and then when you're in there for a long enough time, you think that you're dirt too. So, and then when you tell them, hey, you're not dirt, you're actually awesome, according to what God thinks of you, it kind of makes a big difference for them. And then even for the pen pal thing, people who aren't able to actually go into a prison, letters are one of the most precious things in a prison, I've come to find out from like the exchange that we've had. So we've spoken with people like from Texas, and we'd have this ongoing friendship, and they kind of tell you how like nobody else writes to them, no one else visits them, no one else sees them, but your letter is like what I look for my entire month. That's pretty crazy. You're just some random Joe Schmo in New York or in Chicago, but somebody in Texas looks for your letter the whole month. So that's the pen pal, and that's the in prison. And both, when you get certified to do that, it's not as hard as you might think. And the awesome thing about ministry in prison is that prisoners have a lot of time, I think. So they can become like much closer to God than we can. They can become like monks in a sense, because for them it's like that's their cell, that's their aleya, So you've got a lot of prisoners who, after they make the change, can be walking around with a gigantic study Bible, and be like a little missionary in the prison. Like we've had guys like that who will write to us and tell us how, they're leading an in-prison Bible study and so on. And the reason why we have to do this is because St. Paul tells us in Hebrews 13:3, remember prisoners as if chained with them. And Jesus tells us, I was in prison, you visited me. That's the whole foundation behind this whole idea that we're sharing with you. The last little bubble there, angel tree, is for children of who have their parents in prison. 1/3 of them will wind up in prison themselves. 1/3. That's a lot, I think, too. Not the best math guy, but I think that's a big number. And 104 prisoners today, just today, October 18th or something, will convert to Islam in prison in America today. That's not because, I have nothing against Islam. Islam's cool, I think. But Muslims are, like John was alluding to in a more discreet way, Muslims do a lot of prison ministry. If there was more Orthodox Christian prison ministry, it wouldn't be a hard number to say today 104 people will become Orthodox in prison. Not a hard stretch, because people will embrace Christianity if there's someone there that tells them, hey, God loves you, etc., etc. Because it's not like they're bribing them with stuff, because again, you can't give them stuff. It's more about the presence. So the Angel Tree program is working with the children of those who are in prison, specifically through the holidays, like the one coming up. You guys can actually get involved with this if you want, there's enough time. Working with them, getting them, they actually have their own like requests. Say, oh, I want a little toy car and I want like PJs. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, maybe 3-4 years. Every year. And we actually play Santa around Christmas time, and we go and deliver the gifts to the kids, right in the hood, right in like the project, stuff like that, and we chill, and we show them, hey, this is from mommy, and there's like a little, family restoration there, is that mommy still remembers you even though she's locked up, or like daddy still thinks about you, or whatever. And there's a whole family reconciliation. Then there's also, for us, building a relationship with those who are kind of behind bars, and then with that family as well. And then there are these other organizations that we can help with as well. They're not under Prison Fellowship, but they kind of help with what's called like the halfway process. Like when you're coming out of prison, then you're in the halfway house, somewhere it's not a prison, it's not freedom. You have like a curfew and stuff. It's kind of like being a young Coptic person. Like there's like, just kidding. So that's like a halfway house that we can help with. And maybe just an overarching point with everything that John is saying, and the things that we're going to share with you over the next couple of days, the biggest principle behind all this stuff is this idea of presence. Like you guys have the blessing of having an incarnational presence in this community. Now it's thinking about all the multiple ways of making that happen. How do you have a presence in a local jail? How do you have a presence in a local nursing home, local presence in wherever? Because the more your presence is felt, the more Christ is seen, the more restoration can happen to a community. Just this very simple model. Like, by definition, the fact that a church is planted here means it's healing the community around it. So that's my contribution. Thanks, John.
Well, that's pretty much it. We really talked about all the groups. So I guess at this point, it's up to you guys to see. You don't have to start all 5 at once. I don't know where you guys are as far as the mission process, but definitely pick something, be consistent at it. You guys seem to have a great number of people here, so that shouldn't be an issue. one of the things, just one last things that was really inspirational for us is this idea of the fullness of time. His Grace Bishop David, 1 month into the whole, when FTFT was getting started, he came in front of about 200 people at the time, and he talked to us about how he feels that for mission, that this is the fullness of time, and that, you know, God prepares stuff, a nice church, amazing people, and then now it's up to you guys now, and now that the time is ready, now that you're ripe, to go out and do something with it. And that's about it. Any questions? Okay. Yep, go for it.
I'm not going to let it slide.
Oh, please.
I have a big question.
Sure.
So, we talk about all these events and such, but when I come back to my life and I look at it, I find myself, I'm so busy. How can I find time to do all of those things? Like, you were in med school. How do you manage being a medical student and in the meantime doing all these stuff? Yeah, a lot of times the devil tries to make us feel like we're so busy, there's no, and I always experience this. I admit. So how can we?
Okay. So we were both in med school, yes, time is an issue. If I'd be lying if I say otherwise. We have tests, we have all these things, but I mean, if there's a group of you, there's 5 people, and say you have the biggest test in the world tomorrow, and you can't make it, there's 4 others. You know, and as long as everybody's committed, then this isn't going to be an issue. Trust me, because if everybody's committed, then it's fine. But if everybody's like, hey, maybe I'll go this week, maybe I won't, then the service will meet a lot of, you know, struggles, and meet a lot of pressures, and eventually it'll fade away. But if you have a legitimate thing for that week, and everybody's doing it, it's not going to be an issue. And when you're busier, actually, is when you prioritize your time more, and when you schedule time more, and if it's important enough, if it's something that you're committed to, something that you know that you must do, it's not something nice that you do on a weekend. You're not going there to meet people, you're not going there because you're a really good person, but you're going there because it was a commandment, then all of a sudden things change. When it's a commitment, it's very different than a leisurely activity. So you have to decide, you have to make that decision and say, hey, you know, this is a commitment. Maybe it won't happen the first week, but at some point say, this is important, this is what we're supposed to be doing, it's not something extra I'm doing. Once you've done that, then it makes it easier, I feel. I don't mean if you wanted to add anything to that. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay. So in Africa, before we speak, when we're like visiting with the family or something, we pray, but not out of the Agbeya.
Okay.
We pray with them, but it was Agbeya as you guys are talking about Agbeya prayers.
Sure.
So how intense are these?
Okay.
What do you think?
Great question. As far as praying Agbeya with the actual people, that didn't happen a lot of the times. Actually, probably some of the only times were in Rochester when we did it. You don't have to do Agbeya right away. I think I stressed this point enough, but I'll say it again. You don't have to do the full theology in the first 5 seconds of your conversation. That's just weird, you know? You can't do that.
Like, didn't pray our Father. Like, it would just...
Okay. I'll go as far as say, okay, even that's okay in the beginning, but keep in mind now, this is, okay, you have to think also, all right, how am I going to differentiate myself as an Orthodox mission group from the Protestant right next to me? Like, I'm not saying that you have to do anything elaborate or anything like that, and there's nothing wrong with the Protestant right next to you, but I'm just saying that, just keep that in mind. And if you have that seriously in your heart, that you want to make sure also that you're sound from that aspect as well, then these are tools. Like the Agbeya is a tool. It helps you, you do the Psalms and you do all the prayers, and it puts you in that right mindset. So my answer to you is, if it's not beneficial in the beginning, that's okay. You don't have to do it all at once. With the goal, after consistency and everything, of having that somewhere in your mind that at some point we want to be doing our Father with them. At some point we want them to know what the creed is. At some point. And even if you do little by little by little, maybe eventually you reach there, as opposed to saying, no, we're never going to do that, or that's never the object. I think that will be the issue, but definitely not in the beginning. It's not needed. All right.
I'll just agree. But kind of the same thing is that I think when we believe that something is valuable, like if we think the Lord's Prayer is cool, like, or it helpful for us, then we'll want to be able to share it at some point. When we say, hey, like, you know, and for us, even the creed, like the creed sounds like, oh, it's the creed, you know what I mean? But because we thought there was spiritual principles that were helpful to us, in one of our anniversary dinners with our homeless friends, we brought them into the church, and we had a spiritual talk about 12 life principles that are the creed. First one was the paternal nature of God. How God is daddy. That's cool. That helps me. That's important for me. I'm going to share it with you. Even though you're homeless, you need to know God is your daddy. Like, because otherwise, who's your daddy? You know, it's awkward. Just like, what I'm trying to say is even things that sound dense to us, I think when we're not trying to place it on them, like John is saying, with like forcing a helmet on someone that doesn't belong to them, or like not a helmet, I don't know, if I'm trying to fit you into like my size t-shirt, but you're much smaller or whatever, like not forcing something on you, but saying, hey, this is beneficial, this is kind of cool, you know, why don't you check it out? If it's helping you like it's helping us, that's cool. We're kind of just sharing. So it's whether it's prayer, or whether it's Bible, whether it's anything, like one of the people that were helping us in the training, this lady named Katrina Barr from Focus North America, which is an Orthodox group. You know, you guys probably know them, Fellowship of Orthodox Christians, United Service of Charity. They're not Egyptian, so they're really cool. You guys are cool too, but I'm just like that, sticking it to them. Like, Egyptian audience insulting Egyptians, that's not a good move. But she was telling us, she's like, you know, the thing with orthodoxy and stuff like that, like, you don't always have to say like, I'm doing an Orthodox thing. You just are Orthodox. So you do Orthodox stuff. You know what I mean? If I'm praying an Orthodox prayer because I'm an Orthodox person. So it's not always like infused with like, how can I make this cup of water Orthodox? I don't know. I'm gonna Isham Salib. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's an Orthodox cup of water. You know what I mean? So I think what John is trying to say, and I would kind of agree with, is that it's not like being super preoccupied with that, but it's just keeping in mind that we've got something cool to share, you know, along with kind of whatever's there as well. Edward?
John, you have been talking about being consistent, and so far the main service that we have been consistent with is the sandwich run. But how can we benefit from the consistency every month, and we're usually meeting different people every time we go out? Or what should we do different to make it more effective?
I'm going to take this one.
Are you guys going to the same place every month? You are, okay. And
Not every group goes to the same place.
okay.
We have some of the groups go exactly to the
But
same.
but even when we go to the same place, we don't find the same people.
Is there like an overlap? Are there some people that you find? Because it's good if you don't find people anymore. Maybe they stop being homeless. That would be cool.
I don't think that's very
Just wishful thinking on my part, maybe.
They're children, like they go around.
So that could be a challenge too, is because like even for us both in New York and New Jersey, and like John said, the model has been replicated like North Carolina, Philly, like all these other different kinds of places. Sometimes that would be a challenge because when you're homeless, you're mobile. You know, you can pick up the thing and just kind of go about your business. So it's hard to track them down. You know, that's one thing. As long as I think you have an established presence where they know, like, listen, like we're here, and I think some of the guys were telling us that, is that like they now know your pattern. You know, you're at a specific time, even with your Egyptian timing, like maybe you're a little bit later than usual, but like, so they expect you at 1, not 11, like whatever it is, right? So as long as they know your pattern and they can keep up with your pattern, I think that's the more important part on our job of saying like, this is where we set up shop, you know, and we're right in your neighborhood, come through. If at some point you want to kick it up and say, you know, instead of every month, you know, twice a month, if you think that'll help, if you think you'll find more people that way, you can give that a shot. That could be another option, but I would say maybe don't get bogged down by the fact that you can't track homeless people that well. It's just the nature of their situation. They're hard to track. We had that kind of in every city. I don't know if John, have more thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to also add, like, one of the benefits you guys have here is a physical location. We didn't have that benefit for a while because we'd have to set up events from church to church, but you have one set physical location, so maybe it's not a bad idea, you know, once a month, if you wanted to have a meeting just for them and to invite them to something like that, that's not a bad idea either. And maybe when you invite them there, at least you'll see them there on a consistent basis. Because had we had a more of a physical location at times, I think that's probably what we would have done. Because that's the goal eventually, is to bring them here and to take them from being babies to mature adults. So that would just be my added little thing.
But doesn't that require building a relationship with them in the beginning? No. I mean, I agree with you that we should take them to the next level for being babies, but we didn't even adopt them as babies yet.
Okay.
How can we get to that?
Okay. Here's my opinion on it. I think that, at least from what we've seen, you never know when that stage is going to come. You don't know if that's going to happen on the first encounter. You don't know if that's going to happen 50 encounters down the road. So I would say use your judgment, but err on the side of inviting them. I mean, if it doesn't work out, then they just won't come the next week. But if you see somebody clearly looking for God, and you might not see them next week, and you're going to have, say, this dedicated time, it's not a bad idea. Just tell them, hey, why don't you come here and have some food? We're going to be talking, and take it from there. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, because especially with using the location thing, like it was actually really beneficial when we had so one of the first churches in our area, St. Mark's West Side, we had like a get together for them, and we Ambassador was there, and like the priest, and the senior priest of that church said it was the happiest day of his life in that church when he had like a party for these homeless people. It was really cool. So the idea there, whether you want to look at it as the babies thing, or like to evaluate where they are in the spirit, are they toddlers, are they adolescents, that may not be even the most relevant evaluation. If you're just saying, hey, come, and there's food, there's baby food, there's non-baby food, like eat what you want, you know what I mean? And we're going to have a general seeker talk. The same way that like on Saturdays after your liturgy, when you have the fellowship thing, you don't know if someone's coming in and like, you know, they want milk or they want juice, so to speak, whatever, you know what I mean? Like you're just giving the gospel message and inviting people to it as they come. So like that's up to you guys. If you want to do the physical presence thing of bringing people here, that would be lovely. But even if you don't, if you're continuing the presence there, like that's another thing that one of the bishops was teaching us, is that one of the good things about our Christianity is that it's mobile as well. So whatever you can do here, you know what, say even on site, if you have a little community in the homeless park that you go to or whatever, if in the beginning you start teaching them prayer, then little by little you teach them Bible, there's no problem to little by little later on teach them like liturgy, you know what I mean, like this. That could be a vision that you do it right there too. You know, that could be a little homeless mission church down the line. You know what I mean, just in terms of thinking which direction, you know, so it doesn't have to be that everybody has to come through the same kind of road here. But if they can, you can invite them in to bring them into your house, to your family, like metaphorically speaking, your family here. That'd be cool. We did that a couple times, and it was really, really beneficial for them, because they felt like it's different when you can sit down, chill, shay, you know, it's just like, it's odd. So yeah. Does that make sense? Any other questions on this? So just to give you kind of a heads up for the next couple of days. So we kind of broke it up into different avenues and stuff like that. We're trying to be as comprehensive and boring as possible to cover all bases, give you your value here. This base was a big one, because this is like, it's got to be the starter point, which is you guys already have started with it, and you've been kind of running with it already, is the things that Jesus said, like, if you don't do this to me, like, I don't know you. So that's dangerous stuff not to mess with right there. That's stuff you want to be able to take care of as any church, not a mission church, not a, whatever church. That's stuff you want to be able to bear in mind. So taking that's one thing. Then other things that we want to be able to think about is, okay, what about people that are not in this category? People that are not in this need, how do we reach them? We'll talk about that either tomorrow or Saturday, depending on how our time goes. That will include people like Sherry was alluding to earlier, people who could be just in Boys Town, people who can be in the South Side, people who can be in whatever kind of need or whatever kind of barrier that prevents them from hearing about God. These dudes' barrier is a physical need. There are other barriers in Chicago that are not a physical need, but they're just as serious, right? So that'll be one whole branch of evangelism. That's essentially evangelism. This is essentially like missionary service. And the other thing, the other major thing that you guys are already also working on and growing in is, okay, then once you bring them home, how do you kind of disciple them? How do you grow them? So we're bringing in the specialist dude, from Buddha Anthony's church to kind of walk you through that process of how is that taking place over there. Another bit of it will be, okay, someone who's not in that need, but they're just, a college kid. And college kids are a big ministry, especially because you got thousands of them right here in Chicago. How do you reach all these crazy college kids who are just running around being all crazy, You got to reach them somehow. So that's going to be another session. And just a quick note on this, like while we're telling you about this FTFT thing in general, or specifically rather, honestly, just because it's a brand, okay, like I could give you, with a really great coffee, I can give you Starbucks coffee. Why would you drink the Starbucks coffee? Just because you've seen the logo, you've seen the label everywhere. The first picture that John showed us is, if you recognize the dude in the middle, I don't know if you guys recognize the dude in the middle? That's HHPS3, the late. Okay, so, and that's a bunch of us, and Emma David on the right, and other people in hats and stuff. So that was in 2009, and that's the Pope giving the official papal thumb. This is good stuff. I like this brand. So like John said, if you call it ABC, you call it, the Thirsty People Ministry, whatever you want to call it, it's fine. The reason we just encourage people for a brand is because when it's already kind of gone through the tedious hierarchy of going all the way to PS3 and going to the entire North American clergy, sometimes that helps. And sometimes, and not just even on this side of the world, like the UK, we're kind of thinking the same thing. They're like, you know what, we can use that brand for that purpose. And the same thing for like pamphlets or resources or that sort of thing. And of course, we get commission on everything that you do. It's 20%. We can cut you a deal. Because it's Chicago. So, I'm not kidding. I don't know why you're laughing. No, I'm just joking. So, that's the brand concept. I know it's weird to think about it in ministry, but the reality is when something's been going on for a while and it's stamped by the church, it helps. Instead of feeling like you're just kind of lone soldiers doing something by yourself, it's good to feel that people halfway across the world are using the same idea, same brand. Cool. So thank you guys. Thank John.